Monday, August 28th, 2023, and you can join me every week for the greatest political commentary known to man. Thomas Jefferson said, "When once a republic is corrupted, there is no possibility of remedying any of the growing evils but by removing the corruption and restoring its lost principles. Every other correction is either useless or a new evil." It's been a busy week, believe me, but before we talk about who to nominate for the Republican to run for president, allow me to remind you why it is so important that we make the right choice here. The idiocy of Joe Biden is never ending. We remember when he went after gas stoves earlier this year, but now his focus has shifted to ceiling fans. The Biden administration is now pushing for high-efficiency ceiling fans that could apparently save households $40 in the lifetime of these fans. Just another example of how out of touch this president is, and an excellent reminder of why we need a new one, and fast. If you have ever listened to this show before, you would know that I strongly stand with President Trump. But I'm no fool, and I have to come to terms with whether or not he can actually win a general election. At this point, I'm not ruling it out. He's still my number one choice for now. But just because I'm all aboard the Trump train doesn't mean that I can't explore my options in the event that that train derails. Therefore, I did attend an event where Ron Desantis spoke locally here. The room was packed, but from the people that I spoke with, many were not fully on board with Desantis, and they were keeping their options open. His speech was received very well by everyone, including me. He referenced his accomplishments in the state of Florida and outlined what he would hope to accomplish in office as the president. I had no quarrel with anything he said during that time, but then he began to take questions. When called upon, I asked him the hardest question he got from the crowd. I said, "Why are you in support of sending my money to the corrupt nation of Ukraine?" He basically just reiterated what he said in the debate, which we'll talk about later, and then he said that we can't just keep sending checks and hope to solve a problem, and he also pointed out that he's not going to send boots on the ground in Ukraine. It was a pretty political answer, but it was a political question. I'm still not sure that he's won my support, but it's always great to get in a room full of people with common values and feel a candidate out. He was also asked about the carbon pipeline that we discussed last week. His response was very, very calculated. He said that he hopes eminent domain doesn't have to be used, but didn't even rule it out. He just wants the people to negotiate with Summit Carbon without government involvement if possible. So that was very disappointing. But only time will tell. It's a lot less about what Ron DeSantis does as much as what Donald Trump does that will determine most people's votes, in my opinion. This is your weekly reminder to follow and subscribe to the Conservative American Message on Instagram, Facebook, X, Truth Social, Spotify, YouTube, Apple, and everywhere else, obviously. Please share this episode with all your friends so we can keep offending everyone. The RNC had 8 candidates participate in the first GOP presidential debate hosted by Fox News on Wednesday night. Of course, Trump refused to participate due to the requirement to agree to support the eventual nominee, whoever it was, which I totally stand by his decision based on those grounds. However, I was upset that Trump didn't take the stage to be able to at least defend himself. Presidential debates are one of the greatest events that affect political discourse in this country. So without Trump, this is what we had to work with. Tim Scott, who isn't an idiot, but he's only polling at 1%, so he's not really a serious candidate. Doug Burgum, who's also at 1%, but he's backed by Bill Gates, so I'm not really sure I like that. Asa Hutchinson, who has gone less than 1%, so he's pretty much over. Chris Christie, who's been polling at 1%, and he's an absolute loser. I mean, that guy is completely worthless. Then you had Nikki Haley, who's up to 4%, so that's a little bit better, but she's just trying to ride on the coattails of Trump, which would be fine if it wasn't that Trump was also in this race. Mike Pence is playing the same game, and he's actually at 6%, but it's not even close. Vivek Ramaswamy, who did pretty well in the debate actually, is at 5%. And the only serious challenger that I consider, Ron DeSantis, is at 13%. So in case you're curious, Trump is left at 52% of Republican support. But the debate was somewhat of a disaster with those 8 candidates. Most of the time was spent talking about Trump. You would think they would want to keep the frontrunner out of the spotlight, but they decided to shoot themselves in the foot instead. Chris Christie was basically told how worthless that Fox News thought he was when they asked him a question about UFOs. However, it quickly turned into a showcase of how lazy Republican politicians have become. I lost track of how many questions were asked where Vivek was the only one to commit to doing anything to change our current state of affairs. Everyone else just dodged questions and attacked one another. The one that hit me the hardest was when the moderators asked the field of candidates to raise their hand if they would stop sending money to Ukraine, and Vivek was the only one. That's why I pressed DeSantis on this issue when I met him. But in the debate, he dodged and said that Europe just needs to do their fair share. And that's right when I tweeted that Donald Trump is our only option, which might be a bit of an exaggeration, but at the end of the day, I want a man who has a proven track record as president over a phony rhino who takes no action after they're elected. As the painful debate raged on, Trump did an interview with Tucker Carlson on X simultaneously. I was one of 12.8 million who watched the debate on Fox News. But in that first day, the Tucker interview had 150 million views. Of course, you can't compare this view for view, but still, I think it's safe to say that Tucker beat Fox News that night. I obviously watched the interview after the debate concluded, and it wasn't really anything special. I mean, it's just your typical Trump interview, entertaining enough. He defended his decision to skip out on the debate, and I get where he's coming from. He explained it as being one of the only candidates that is even polling at double digits. He really has already over half of GOP support, so why go up on stage and get attacked by these clowns? He also talked at length about how his polling numbers continue to rise with every indictment that comes. He was arrested this week, by the way, in Georgia and booked on bogus charges. Near the end, Trump made the most important point about his candidacy. It doesn't matter whether the nominee is Trump, DeSantis, or any other Republican. The establishment will come after anyone. That's why, at least for now, I'm sticking with Trump. But DeSantis is definitely my number 2 choice. Well, that's all I have time for. Were you offended by this podcast? Good. Thanks for listening, guys. I really appreciate you all. Have a great week and stay conservative.